open head surgery. Killing spree. Marines incoming.
The original Xbox was a legendary console fit with a library of games that are mostly considered legendary by veterans who grew up with it in their households. To name every game I ever played on that thing would take a day and a half, so I find it easier to dissect just a few whenever I have time. Today I'm opening an old wound. The game I'm discussing in this editorial is very personal because I have zero faith that the series would ever make a successful comeback in today's broken video game market, but TimeSplitters, succinctly speaking, was so good in terms of quality arcade gameplay that it took up a good chunk of my life. To this day, I come back and replay TimeSplitters for its addicting and nostalgic story. I'd like to think it sparked a massive change in the gaming industry, inspiring future projects that outlived and outranked the series today. I'm no expert, so I don't know for sure. All I can promise you is this is one of the greats. TimeSplitters wasn't a series that I became familiar with until the third game released on both PlayStation 2 and original Xbox back in March of 2005. That was the same year as other gaming giants like God of War, Resident Evil 4, Call of Duty 2, Shadow of the Colossus. I could go on. Needless to say, it had some competition. But isn't that weird to think about now as an adult? Games used to compete for your consumerism by offering unique gameplay elements and trying to up the ante every time. We had so many fucking games released that year, and any one of them could have won Game of the Year in my opinion. I'm not gonna shake my fist and act like an old cretin with some long-winded rant. I'm just saying, games were better. Let's move on. It wasn't long into a weekend stay at my cousin's house that he introduced me to a game that I never thought I'd fall deeply in love with. It's called TimeSplitters Future Perfect, and it's gonna be the subject of discussion for the next 45 fucking minutes, so sit down and shut up. Back then, I was only familiar with the online multiplayer mode, which I'll do my best to cover near the end of this little shindig. The appeal struck me with the fast-paced animations and the charming menu selections of the game's hundreds of selectable characters. Not to mention, in the arcade modes, you get to use any gun in the game that you want. Not gonna lie to you, I find it really fucking difficult to discuss this one. As with all of my old school game reviews, I can never sum it up correctly with the right words. Being there and experiencing this for the first time is the only true way to understand how it feels. It's a blast from the past. Ironic, considering how its clever and interesting main story worked to keep the player invested in a neat sci-fi adventure. Now, like I said, I never played the first two games that much, but I remember their legacy, and I know for a fact they had quite an impact on my small-town neighborhood. That goes without saying that TimeSplitters 3 was also adored by fans, continuously referenced and brought up in whispered conversations. I doubt anyone would revive these games today, which does infuriate me. But what the fuck can I do about it? Bitch to the executives at Electronic Arts and beg them to put it back out there so they can take advantage of the veteran players by introducing shitty, awful microtransactions in every aspect of the damn thing? No thanks. I say let this one be. Because this game is still good, even on an emulator, which is what I'm using today. I don't have much of a choice besides using PC XS2 and an Xbox One controller to run this game. So let's get started. This is one of the many games from my childhood that I will never forget. The story continues right after the ending of TimeSplitters 2, where Sergeant Cortez crash lands onto an alien planet during a counterattack against the invasion of a dangerous alien species known as TimeSplitters. These strange creatures are capable of turning themselves invisible as well as throwing, bolts of fucking lightning. They tear humans apart viciously, showing a gruesome side to this chaotic war that the player is forced to lead. Cortez is thrown around in different time periods in order to hunt down the time crystals, which are being used by an unknown man to navigate time and change history, benefiting his plan for world domination. Although he's mostly written as a joke character, I really liked Jacob Crow. He's the madman who manipulates time in order to get the things he wants, including a massive cult of dedicated followers who stop at nothing to achieve eternal life in the name of abstract science. It's a disturbing plot with plenty of humor and serious moments thrown in. TimeSplitters has always been known for its witty, clever, and quick humor, which is elevated further thanks to its dialogue and characters. However, I feel like the third game is the greatest in every field. Action, gameplay, cinema, weaponry, destruction, detail. This was an extremely impressive game for the time, and yet it seems nobody talks about it anymore. Well, I'll start off with the most fun aspects. I love the guns in this game. They all feel unique, representing their time periods with cool designs and functions. There are so many guns, each with their own strengths and weaknesses. But the main component is the combat, which is still addicting in my old age. You have the ability to melee someone if they're too close to you, with some guns having different animations. The uplink is a unique wrist tool that magnetizes objects to your position. Consider it like the gravity gun from Half-Life, only if it were a bit less effective. I do find it extremely cool that you can use physics objects as weapons in case you don't have a firearm available, and various story points demand that you use the uplink in order to pass. I know I'm always quoted for saying something similar in all of my reviews, but this is a really cinematic game. They did a fantastic job of setting the player up for unexpected yet welcome disasters. A lot of missions have really engaging scenes like the fighter planes on Scotland the Brave or destroyed city ruins in Machine Wars. Every level feels alive with its own universe. The storyline is very consistent and has a lot to offer even after all this time. As you're fighting your way through many time periods, you're always engaging in unique combat scenarios or fighting interesting enemies. Sometimes the characters you interact with have really hilarious dialogue, making them enjoyable and memorable. My favorite was R100 because after the mission Something to Crow About, he gains self-awareness and starts saying all kinds of crazy shit. I'll admit that the game isn't nearly as long as I thought it was in my youth. Using an emulator, I was able to beat it in less than 7 hours, and that's including the time I spent searching for secrets and ammo and supplies. This might as well lean into the complaints I have. Yeah, I know, complaining about the flaws of a PlayStation 2 game weren't on my bingo card for this year, but here we are. So one of my first complaints about this game is Cortez can't jump. This is a common known fact among the fanbase, but it makes the overall experience a bit ridiculous. Most of the elements here are designed for an arcade-style shooter, but they're not gonna give me a way to jump? That's like giving a skydiver a parachute so he can swim in a fucking pool. It doesn't make much sense. On harder difficulties, the game tends to be relentless with its obstacles, testing the patience of any player eager to pick up a controller and play, but the most punishing part about the whole thing is the checkpoint system. If you fuck up and die when you're 3/4 into a level, you're going back. Way back. That means you're sitting through the dialogue and cutscenes again too. Moreover, replaying the same section on repeat feels embarrassing, but it's not fair to throw the player back to such a far checkpoint, all because of one tiny mistake. This is even more apparent on hard mode. Though most of the missions were a breeze, the ones I struggled with were mostly due to being sent to a bullshit checkpoint after completing a laundry list of chores to get that far in the first place. The electro tool is useless against everything because it temporarily stuns enemies for like 1 second. The rocket launcher is another weapon that, for some reason, I really loved as a kid, but you have to be so precise, and the splash damage on most explosive weaponry is broken, possibly due to engine limitations. The mag charger is a really cool concept for a gun, but again, outside of the main campaign, the novelty of its thermal sight wears off and your eyes begin to hurt from the blue screen effect. Speaking of which, certain missions contained a permanent smudge blur that I couldn't remove to save my life. I tried fucking around with PCXS2's settings for like 35 minutes, I looked up tutorials online, I could not fix this shit. There's only so much that an emulator can do for an outdated game such as this. The concept of traveling through time, fighting multiple enemies with unique arsenals, and engaging in these long journeys makes TimeSplitters 3 very addicting. I love the wormholes that Cortez encounters in the story, and it's pretty fucking cool that you have to quite literally save your own ass from danger in a well put together and cohesive narrative. The game had split-screen multiplayer as well, allowing you to bring a couch buddy in on the action. Cortez helps his future and past self at important story segments, making for some entertaining jokes. It's never afraid to break character in that regard. From battling zombies and ghosts in the underground mines to hopping train cars and shooting down helicopters, Cortez gets involved in a lot of historical shit apparently. The boss fights aren't as entertaining as you'd remember though. Some of them don't ever change their tactics, often handing you the advantage in combat. The giant creature in Mansion of Madness is impossible to dodge. She launches a fireball at Cortez's fucking face, and her stupid twig arms are constantly swiping my left and right flanks. She also likes to bend down and take a huge bite out of my bald fucking head like Randy Bobandy to a cheeseburger. Then there's bosses like the tank in Scotland the Brave. It's a bit gimmicky, but what you're supposed to do is hit the tank with a rifle grenade to stall it, then walk up behind it and plant dynamite. However, instead of taking extra time to plant the dynamite, you can just use the rifle grenades. There's not much of a strategy, and I'd say any brainless idiot such as myself can surpass this with flying colors. Cortez, unfortunately, doesn't talk during the gameplay. It's mostly the background characters that tell the story while Cortez acts as the muscle, pushing through to the next objective. It's a little old by today's standards. but I wasn't a big fan of having no map to rely on for item and general player positions. Call me stupid, but if this is your first time ever playing the game, you're probably gonna get fucking lost. I can't tell you how many times I had to retrace my steps in order to remember where to go. Fucking Lewis and Clark wouldn't be able to beat this first try. The player has to rely on muscle memory from childhood for most of these areas, but I'm exaggerating a bit. It doesn't take that long to figure out. Remember the puzzles that involved you having to rotate individual pieces in order to get past? Those were a real pain in the ass back then, and they're a fucking pain in the ass now. I always had to have one of my siblings help me get past this. At the end of the game, just before the finale, the player is forced to go through like 4 or 5 different variations of this same puzzle, and it's just tedious. Sometimes combat is floaty and wonky, more than telling of the game's age. It's no wonder it doesn't perform the greatest graphically, but what really bugs me is the hit detection. You have to be really precise if you want to land those headshots and critical moves. I ended up embarrassing myself with the amount of bullets I wasted. The double-barrel shotgun in TimeSplitters 3 is one of the worst interpretations of the iconic firearm I've ever seen or used, and that's no exaggeration. At absolutely no point will you hit your targets in the perfect spot on your first try. The double barrel is a strange blend of being a small rifle and a dinky airsoft gun. The only times you really get to use it in the main story are for Mansion of Madness and What Lies Below, but it's useless against zombies unless you're aiming for the head. Your shot has to be perfectly aligned, otherwise you'll knock the zombies back, dealing little to no damage, only to watch them stand up again. It gets annoying having to steady my aim all the goddamn time, and it gets worse when zombies begin using shotguns of their own. What the fuck? Using a bat is pointless, the revolver is too precise, and the double barrel does whatever the fuck it wants. Don't make the mistake of igniting them either, because the damage is too low and the zombie will corner you anyway. Fighting ghosts is pretty cool. I like the concept of the ghost gun and how it requires a special set of goggles to operate effectively. It's not really useful outside of these 2 main missions, however. One really cool feature I've always liked is unlocking characters and cheat codes through completing challenges. If you're taking a break from the main campaign, you can try out some of TimeSplitters 3's epic challenge modes, which are filled to the fucking brim with content. There are standard challenges centered around specific objectives like basketball, horde survival, but there's also league challenges with varying difficulties as you battle against tons of bots. I'm not gonna lie, you'd have to pry me off of my gaming chair using a crowbar to get me away from these challenges. Most of them are so fun and addicting. It's not a big deal if you get a low score and mess up, because you can try as much or as little as you want, and upon completion, you'll sometimes unlock cheat codes that can be activated for the main campaign. Some of these cheats and special unlocks can't be obtained unless you're playing through on a harder difficulty. I beat most of the main missions on hard, but some were far too difficult for a simpleton such as myself. I did the best with what I had, but the important thing is, I enjoyed myself, and these extra modes are all included with the base game. It didn't cost a single extra dime. I would talk about each mode in depth, but this is more of a reflection on a classic title that I think deserves the limelight rather than an analytical review. TimeSplitters 3 also had the improved arcade mode where you could choose not only who you want to play as, but what map to fight on, the bots of each team, the weapon selection, the unique and well-designed areas. All of it still feels really awesome to play. There's so many people you can choose from and hundreds of fun ways to learn the maps. They don't make multiplayer games like this anymore. No tricks, no special perks, no stupid pay-to-win bullshit skins. Just a game packed with content, furnished, playable, and timeless. What more could you ask for? Well, at some point, I gotta stop talking about this shit and get back to the real world. Either way, TimeSplitters 3 had the greatest story and gameplay of the series, and I didn't need to play the other 2 to form that conclusion. It's just really great on its own. Obviously, this game is never coming back. The series has remained dormant for ages now, and a return would only disappoint me. They'd stuff that turkey with as many microtransactions and so much bullshit they can think of just to piss on the fanbase. Cortez deserves better, but thankfully, Future Perfect sees to that. It might be old and a bit crusty on the surface, but it's one of my all-time favorite games. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me yap about it. Forgive me as I can never let this game die. It's my duty to replay it today, not just because it represents an amazing gaming era, but also due to its peak storytelling and memorable characters. I'll see you guys next time. It's time for me to split. Yeah, that sounded cooler in my head. Sorry.